Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for this of the second edition of the Journey from UD virtual series. Tonight's theme is Blue Hen Bylines. I'm Nancy Karabjanian, and I'm with the University of Delaware UD Journalism. Department and Alumni Relations has partnered with UD Journalism for tonight's event for bringing in some of our most accomplished alumni and asking them to share their experiences and their journey from UD. I have a few notes about tonight's program. As you are watching the program, if you have any questions or comments, you can put them in the Q&A section. There will be a portion of the program later on that will be for Q&A. But as we go through, if you have something, add it in at that time. Don't wait until the end or we'll get all backlogged toward the very end of our program. And by the way, the program's going to be recorded tonight. So I guess that means we can all kind of relive this in a couple of days once you're able to check it out on the UD YouTube pages. You know, I have my own journey from UD story and my own Blue Hen byline. I started at the radio station. Back then it was XDR and on winter term television. A long career in TV news followed, and it was a very rewarding career. And then I came back to Newark and began teaching broadcast journalism. I've also joined the Center for Political Communication. And now, added to that, I'm administering the UD journalism program. You might have gotten an email from us recently about a survey that we're doing, and I implore you to please fill it out because we're trying to really take UD journalism into the next chapter of the industry. So, you know, when you think about it, my journey is either a circle, a figure eight, I don't know what it is, but it's kind of all over the place. And it's been a fun one too, and I'm happy to be back in Newark. So first up, as we get started tonight, is a familiar face to anybody in the region who gets up with 6 ABC Action News. From the class of 94, a very proud and a very gracious Blue Hen, Matt O'Donnell shares his journey with us as we begin our program.
Hello everyone, I'm Matt O'Donnell. I'm the morning anchor at Channel 6 in Philadelphia, also a University of Delaware graduate. I was an English major with a concentration in journalism and a political science minor. And I'm going to talk about my time at Delaware, my time in the broadcast journalism industry, and then I'm going to talk about how things have changed. So let's go to where it all began. Delaware, Newark. It was the perfect place for me. I enjoyed every minute of it. I spent 4 years there. I wanted to spend more. That's all I had. And it was just, I knew from the moment that I arrived on campus that this was the place for me. I loved the teachers, I loved the people, I loved where I lived, I loved the nightlife, I loved the campus activities that I really engaged with. It was just great. Journalism classes. In the basement of Memorial Hall, typewriter at my desk, and Dr. Harris Ross or Dr. Dennis Jackson roaming through this small classroom with a very low ceiling, teaching us how to write a story in a newspaper. I loved it. To this day, my best skill is writing. It's what keeps me going on a daily basis. It's what I rely on when times are tough, when deadlines are approaching. The basic elements of writing that I learned in that classroom on campus made me what I am today. I also want to mention Ted Spiker, who is now at the University of Florida, another great influence, great teacher. While he was there at Delaware, taught magazine writing. Now we move on to the Review, the campus newspaper, another place where I learned so much. Some of my colleagues at the time, fellow students, Jeff Pearlman, the very controversial Jeff Pearlman, author of many books, sports books, most recently a book about Kobe Bryant and that era of the Los Angeles Lakers. Doug Donovan was a colleague of mine. He won a Pulitzer Prize while at the Baltimore Sun. He is now doing public relations. Brian Hickey, classmate and colleague of mine. He's a local journalist in Philadelphia. Adrian Mann, Richard Jones. So many great names, so many great people I got to work with on a daily basis. I remember Saturday night deadlines, not going out with my friends, but being in there in the crunch of trying to get the newspaper out on the campus. I remember listening to music while we were typing on our Macintosh computers up in the review offices. I remember battling with people over coverage, over whether a line sounded right, whether the grammar was correct, and I especially remember being able to go out and be a real reporter and write things down and talk to people and see things. And that was the first time I ever experienced that. The first moments that I was able to say, hey, I'm a journalist. Let's also talk about the radio, WXDR FM 91.3. That's what it was called when I was on campus. It was Experience Delaware Radio. They decided to change it to the voice of the University of Delaware, WVUD. Another place where I was able to hone a craft that is extremely important to me right now, and that would be my voice. As you know, when you're on the radio, all you have is your copy, what you say, and how you say it, and the voice in which you say it with. One thing that sticks out in particular was when Ross Perot, who was a presidential candidate and who at that time opposed the NAFTA agreement, the North American Free Trade Agreement, went on campus to hold a rally. We were doing a live broadcast, and he happened to listen to it, decided to come on over and talk to me live on the air. I've never had that experience before. It was great. A presidential candidate talking to a student, a budding journalist at the University of Delaware. Another thing that stands out while I was at WVUD was my first really big political interview. It was with then Delaware Senator, now President of the United States, Joseph Biden. He was talking to me on the phone for a broadcast about the 1994 crime bill, which he supported along with then President Bill Clinton. I asked the first question. Then Senator Biden gave the answer. 30 minutes later, he was done answering the question, and it was time to sign off. Luckily for me, I was able to get a job right out of school. Only 3 or 4 days was I working, and that was at a station in Binghamton, New York, called WICZ, News Team 40. I did everything. I was a reporter for television, also the photographer, also the assignment editor, also the person who drove the news vehicle around, also the person who ran the teleprompter during the newscast, also the person who would write extra stories, also the person who would take what we called carbon paper and separate them so we have multiple scripts for everyone, because we didn't necessarily use computers. I remember having a large metal desk that probably could have served as a tank at some point if you put wheels on it, indestructible. And I would call and assign myself stories and go out there and do it all on my own, and that was pretty rewarding. I also remember filling in for the news anchor and having to produce the show and time it out, all while actually doing it live on the air. This was a low-budget operation, but it was perfect for me. No social media, no HD television. That actually was in the 4:3 ratio, or it was more like a box back then. No echo chambers and no usage of the term fake news as a weapon. My next job in my career was at WSTM in Syracuse, New York, the NBC station. And two things I remember in particular. Number one, I wanted to cover a city council meeting. Some type of issue was coming up. And the news director looked at me and he's like, not much video to be had at this city council meeting. Are you sure about this? And I'm like, yeah, you never know what's going to come up. And he told me, Matt, listen, our job as TV news people is to make sure we inform people, but at the same time, make sure we don't bore them. And that's something I've always remembered. I've always seen that as a balance that it's never easy to achieve. The other story that stood out was this murder mystery where a woman had been killed, and police were honing in on this man who may have been her boyfriend at one point. And somehow I found out where he might live. And so my photographer and I staked out outside of his apartment. And finally, I guess I wore him down, and he came out. And he said, ask me any question you want. And I did. And I got back with this huge exclusive, only person to talk to this individual who could be a person of interest in this murder. And I remember the producer saying, great, we're leading with the hurricane coming up the East Coast. I was like, sometimes weather is above everything else when it comes to news. Eventually, I made it back home to my dream job here at WPVI TV, 6ABC, a station I watched when I was a kid and always dreamed about holding that microphone with the 6 on it, and it was a dream come true, really. What I found in my time first arriving here to now, where I'm the morning anchor, and I have been for about 16 years, is that the television industry has transitioned from being television stations to being content providers, pumping out information, pumping out stories to whichever pipes might lead to people's eyeballs. One of the biggest changes, obviously, in television news is the existence of social media. It was not around when I first entered the business. It hasn't been around for all that long. If you really look at things, it's been about 15 years, and it really has changed things. It's allowed us to communicate with the viewer and back, but at the same time, it's created this scenario where you really don't know what is true and what is not. And it's really taken over the newspaper industry, and it has created this competitor we never had before, a competitor for eyeballs. We used to think we compete against television stations in our market. We compete for people's time now, and that is because of social media. Another big change is the entertainment value in television news. We've gone from, let's say, Walter Cronkite sitting there at a desk with a blue screen, not much going on, to a studio here at our television station that has all sorts of bells and whistles and has all these video screens and really jazzes things up. And that's okay, because if you look at anything, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a movie that's coming out, whether it's a skyline in some big city, whether it's a new car that they want you to buy, they can't just present you with the nuts and bolts. They need to add to it. And so it's okay for TV news to be window dressed as long as you're still telling the story. To kind of sum things up, here are some things that have not changed. Number one, you still tell the story. It doesn't matter. If there's no story, there's no news. And so given that we've also tried to make things more exciting and interesting when you are presented the news, you still have to have these great stories, and so it's still about people. It's still about going out in the community and finding things and talking to people and seeing what's on people's minds. So that has not changed. Another thing, still giving the community a voice. Our mantra for all these years, and one of the secrets to our success, is we want everyone in this entire DMA, this region, this greater Philadelphia region, to feel like they're included. And so sometimes that's very difficult because people have differing opinions, especially in a very large area like this. We still need to make sure everyone is given a voice. And the final thing that hasn't changed for me and for anyone else, we as news people need to set an example. And this is a broad observation, but it really holds true. We need to make sure that people trust us. And how do people trust us? We need to act like members of the community who are responsible, who look for the facts, who try to remain objective, and who tell the story. That's it. That's my presentation. Sorry I wasn't able to be live with all of you. I'm probably in bed as we speak. Final words? Go Hens.
Hey everyone, I'm Domenico Montanaro. I'm a senior political editor at NPR, and I'm here tonight with our panel, and thanks very much to Matt O'Donnell for that video. I can empathize, having been on the air early in the morning. You need that sleep. So tonight I want to introduce you to our panel from our Journey from UD, and with us is Evan Washburn, sideline reporter at CBS Sports. Beth Thompson-Greeley, who's a senior supervising producer at Dr. Phil. Matt Butler, a reporter at the Ithaca Voice in New York. And Patrick Gillespie, a reporter with Bloomberg News in Argentina. And Patrick, I guess let's start with you. Why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about your journey from UD, what your professional experience has been like, and then we'll go around and everyone can introduce themselves as well.
Great, thank you, Domenico. Yes, I write I'm Patrick Gillespie, and I write about Argentina's economy and government. I started here in Argentina in 2018, and 10 years prior, I started at the University of Delaware as a freshman. I worked at the Review for 4 years, doing various positions from reporter to editor, and I think back to my senior year, I finished as a reporter because I enjoyed the experience and the process of reporting so much. I decided to travel abroad, actually, to South America after college. Really enjoyed that experience. And I knew that during my time at UD, I had done a couple of internships, and that kind of confirmed my view that I really wanted to get into journalism. And so after traveling abroad, getting the travel bug out of me, I came back to New York. I went to City University and got a master's degree in journalism, and that was able to transition me into my first full-time position at CNN, where I wrote about the U.S. economy and later emerging markets. And through a few trips that I had with CNN in Latin America, it transitioned, it opened the door for me to be at a place like Bloomberg, where I'm full-time here in Buenos Aires. My journalism journey and career really started at UD, and certainly the seeds for every step of the process were planted, in those early internships and the journalism classes I had on campus. So that's my mini bio.
Yeah, a little bit of mix of TV, and then now with Bloomberg, more heavily print, but online. So we have a mix of people with different, platforms that we've been involved with. Matt, you're reporting with a print newspaper. I started out at a print newspaper. Why don't you tell us what your experience has been and how you got there and what your journey's been like?
Yeah, so now I'm actually at an online only publication now, but that's only been for about the last 6 or 7 months. Before that, I was at an alt weekly publication, which was print, called the Ithaca Times. I'm at the Ithaca Voice now. But before that, I guess going back, I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware. I went to the University of Delaware just because, I don't know, I'd sort of always envisioned myself as a blue hen. And then I kind of started writing for the Review, I think my second week of college. And then they didn't let me write for the Review for a little while because some of my stories weren't really up to snuff there early on. And that was probably a smart call on their part. But I think after a couple months, I sort of got back in the good graces and started writing for them again. And I just kind of fell in love with it. So I was the editor-in-chief of the Review at, I think in 2015, 2016 when I graduated. And yeah, I mean, so much of the stuff that I, learned, I think from the Review, because I think the Review is, just an extremely valuable thing. I think there's this learning in journalism classes is one thing, but, actually having your stuff be published and edited, and, you're not receiving a grade, you're receiving actual public reaction to your work. I think that's, it's just the most valuable thing you can gain from being in school, like you're supposed to get sort of field experience. So the way I came up here was, I guess I graduated in 2016, obviously, and then I was working as a lifeguard. I was doing research for a book I'm writing. No, that's not true. I was just getting work because I had nothing else to do, and and I got real desperate because I thought, you sort of see these ominous headlines about how there's no work to be had in journalism anymore. But I just kind of expanded the scope a little bit and was just sending stuff out. And the Ithaca Times was the first people to call me back. So that was in November 2016. And then I took over as managing editor in, I guess, August 2018. And it was pretty much just kind of me, writing most of the paper for the next 2 years, I think. And it was, it was fine. It was good. It's an alt weekly kind of gives you the, and there's not many around anymore, but an alt weekly gives you a chance to just be kind of offbeat, but still, the room to be creative, but also, hard hitting and seeking accountability, that sort of thing. And then I moved on to a place that's right across the street, actually, from the Ithaca Times in the Ithaca Voice, which is a nonprofit news organization. It's, user supported, mainly fueled by donations from the community. And yeah, I'm working on public health and education stuff now. So there is some public health stuff going on. So I'm not usually bored. It's been nice.
So Matt, we're all reporters, right? So when you say that you weren't doing so great at the review, you were turned away, you weren't allowed to write, and then you skipped a couple steps there. You said you became editor in chief. Like, how did that happen? Like, was there someone influential to kind of get you on a track to help you, get that way? Like, was there a professor? Was it mentoring at the review? What was that process like?
Yeah, it was, there were people, not necessarily that first year, but when I kind of got more ingrained with the review, I think they kind of hired me to be, I think an assistant news editor my sophomore year. And that was mostly just because I was like around the building so much and they kind of needed a body. And then I just sort of kept, coming back, and the people I met at that time were like really influential. So those were people who aren't actually in journalism anymore, unfortunately, but yeah, classmates. I don't know if anyone on the call knows, but people like Katie Zuvich, Megan Juzak, Ryan Barwick. He just finished up working for Adweek. But yeah, those people were really influential in keeping me coming back and sort of making the review like a little bit more of a family. And as I just did keep coming back and was more enthusiastic about it, I just got more and more excited about reporting. And in terms of professors, I think the person who had the most influence on me, there were probably two, was Mark Bowden, who kind of, I think, really had a big influence on how I write and how I want to structure a story. And, pardon me, Lydia Timmons as well, who I didn't start off great with her either. I tried to skip her class because it was intro to reporting and I was my second semester senior. And I thought like, well, come on, I can probably do this. But she said, maybe don't be a jerk and try this class out for a couple of weeks. So I did, and it was great. She was totally right.
I want to encourage our viewers. What are they called? Zoomers? I don't know what we call people now when we're in the middle of this pandemic and we have to be on Zoom calls all the time. But we have a Q&A button there. There's the chat. Anybody, if you feel like something really popped up that you want to ask somebody a question about, we're checking that out and we'll try to answer that for you. So Beth, why don't we move over to you? Going from Delaware to the Dr. Phil show out in LA, and then back to the East Coast. Maybe explain some of why you took that journey and how you made it there.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Beth Thompson-Greeley, Senior Supervising Producer at the Dr. Phil show. I cannot express how well University of Delaware prepared me for my career. I really got involved as soon as I got to campus. I started working for the Public Relations Office. I started contributing to the review. I actually became a TA for some of the television production classes. I was an interdepartmental major with television and journalism and English. And I had a lot of two very pivotal professors, one being Nancy Karabjanian herself. I was part of her first year at Delaware, her first year back, as well as Ralph Begleiter, who was coming from CNN. They both really shaped my career. I had been on a newscasting path. I thought I was really interested in news. And it was with the help of Nancy and Ralph, both of my professors. They were the ones who really encouraged me to try the producing angle behind the camera. They could tell that I really enjoyed storytelling. And as a result, I was able to get an internship at WHYY in Delaware and kind of start my journey. I then pivoted to reality television in Philadelphia, starting with the original Trading Spaces. Then I moved to Manhattan, where I delved into the music world at MTV and the Travel Channel, again, staying with reality. And then I journeyed to court television and eventually found my way out to Los Angeles to work for the Dr. Phil show. I started as an associate producer there. I'd actually previously been producing, but it was the #1 talk show and still is right now. And so I kind of took a step down in the beginning to really learn the ropes, and then was able to kind of further my path by getting promoted to producer. senior producer, supervisor, and now senior supervisor. And that was a far journey. And I'm happy to report that amidst the pandemic, I have been able to keep my job and actually relocate back to the Philadelphia area with my family.
Wow. Well, we all take sort of different routes to get to where we're going. And one of the things that I always remembered at Delaware, I was sitting somewhere, it might have been like at Bennigan's when it still existed. And there was a guy who was really kind of down and talking about how he can't believe his senior, he has to pick the job he wants to do. And his whole life is going to be mapped out. And I think that for some of us who've, been on the other side of it for a little bit, you can take a lot of different journeys and routes to get to where you eventually go, where you feel comfortable, because you can't make that decision at 21, and you shouldn't be pigeonholed into that. As long as you're good at something, not to sound like schlocky, but like you can give it your all. If you're good at it and you try hard and you really like it, you're probably going to succeed. So Evan, let's move on to you. CBS Sports. I know you were a former lacrosse player at the University of Delaware, which is pretty cool. I have to say, as a New Yorker, I'm from Queens. They didn't have a lot of lacrosse in Queens, but there was lacrosse in Long Island, obviously. And I just loved lacrosse, covering it for the university, for the Review. I was a managing sports editor. I loved covering lacrosse. I think it's such a fun game. So why don't you tell us about, kind of your background with sports and then getting into reporting and where you are now.
Yeah, appreciate it. And great to be here with everybody. Evan Washburn, class of 2008, coming to you from Baltimore. And my journey, like everybody in this business, has its own unique path. I was at University of Delaware for 5 years, so 03 to 08. I was a member of the men's lacrosse team for that entire time. And probably, I always say I was there for 5 years because of lacrosse, but it might have taken me 5 years to get that degree. I enjoyed every minute of it. I was an English major with a journalism concentration. I was not as active in the Review or the campus radio station or TV station. I did do a couple articles, I think, for the Review. So officially, I was part of the staff. I think it was part of a feature writing class, and I did enjoy it. I was always being tugged in multiple directions as an athlete there, and that was probably my number one priority, and academics took a back seat to that. It's something that I did regret when I graduated, because the entire time I was at University of Delaware, my focus was to become a top tier athlete and then worry about school as best I could. And I knew that I wasn't going to be playing lacrosse for the rest of my life. And as I got towards the end, I actually suffered a pretty severe injury that forced reality right onto my lap. It happened senior day there on Fred P. Rouleau, that artificial turf that if I ever really need some coin, I might take a lawsuit out on against. I'm just kidding. But it
probably
was
a statute of limitations on that. I don't know.
That's true. Good point. I never really spent much time in the law either. But look, I graduated in 08, and I had always talked about, look, TV is something I spend a lot of time watching. Sports is what I spend a lot of time doing. So how about we combine the two, knowing very little about just how incredibly competitive, hard that world is, and unique it is, because it's an incredibly, it's a totally different language in a lot of ways. So when I did graduate, I was able to get an internship. I kind of backdoored my way into an internship at what is now NBC Washington. Then it was Comcast Sportsnet DC. If you're at UD right now, it's the NBC Philly version in DC. And much like sports, I just kind of threw myself into it and just became obsessed with every aspect of the sports television business. And the beauty of it was I was living at home in Annapolis. I didn't have any responsibility whatsoever. While all the other interns had to either go back to school or go to grad school, I just stayed at the station. So I just became a station rat, if you will, and did every job and tried to learn every job and tried to find any version of value I could. So I became a production assistant as a freelancer, and that gave me freedom to go try other things and find other projects and other ways to get experience. And what the real break for me was using lacrosse as a former player to be an analyst on some local college games in the Baltimore, DC area that gave me a chance to put a tape together that I eventually sent to CBS College Sports, which is now CBS Sports Network, our cable station. And they liked it, and they used me on some college games. And then I showed them a tape of some fake stand-ups I'd done on some NFL coverage in Baltimore as an intern and a PA. And at first they were like, "These are terrible. I don't know why you're even putting this in front of us." But eventually they gave me a shot on the sidelines for college football. This would have been in 2012. And it just kind of grew from there. So again, I was always thinking I was going to go on the traditional path of small market TV and work your way up the ladder. And I was fortunate to get a few opportunities and was able to do well enough with them that it led to the next one. And now it'll be 10 years in April that I've been with CBS full time. I think it's been 6 years. And now I'm one of our lead sideline reporters. I host shows on the cable side. I still get to do some college lacrosse analyst work, and I love every day of my job. Obviously, the NFL is my main focus. I just finished up college basketball, and now I'm here talking with you guys. So excited to be here.
Hey, did you play on the softball team for Comcast in DC?
I didn't, because I was living in Annapolis at home with my parents, and then I moved up to Baltimore with a buddy, and so I was actually commuting, and this was, I'm sure we'll all get into little aspects of our story, but and part of this too for everyone is you just kind of have to pitch stuff. So I pitched covering Baltimore sports because they kind of technically had to cover them, but they didn't want to. They just wanted to cover DC. So I got thrown assignments. So I kind of lived in Baltimore and made that home, and thankfully it's still home today.
It's just one of those. The DC Media Softball League is competitive.
Legendary. I've heard.
We have a question from Benjamin Ringe. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. He asks, my most inspiring moment when working at the Review was when author David Simon came to speak to us after he wrote Homicide. What was your favorite moment? And for those of you who weren't at the Review, let's just tell us like what your favorite moment was, journalistically at the university. Anyone can take that first.
I can.
Patrick,
I'll go with it.
Yeah.
My senior year, I was writing at the Review, but a little bit dealing with a little bit of senioritis, and a classmate of mine spoke to a former professor who felt that she was unfairly treated at the university, and it turned out into the last story that I wrote at the Review, which was several women in the engineering department, if my memory serves me right, at the university, who felt that there was unfair pay gaps and treatment between men and women in the engineering department. And I sort of went from feeling a bit in a rut and not sure about how much more time I was going to spend at the Review, because it was my spring semester of senior year, to diving 10 feet deep in and going full on to publish, I think our second to last week at school, a big enterprise story where we had interviewed over a dozen people, current and former faculty, and it was a really balanced story. We had the department's view on things as well. So I think that was a moment where, after 4 years at the Review, to have your final story be a big investigative project was very rewarding experience.
Yeah, that was one of the things I always found there, was that we were able to, make mistakes. We were also able to kind of chase stories. I mean, I had a similar experience to Matt in that my first story was on, I think, the men's soccer team. And I was sat down and it was just shredded. I mean, it was not good. Every story should not begin with the name of the team, right? And that was kind of the Delaware men's soccer team. And but there was room to be mentored, room to grow. And there were two things for me that really stood out. One, I had Bill Fleischman as a professor there, and he was very patient with all of us. And we got to cover a Philadelphia Flyers game, and we got to go and sit in the press box, go into the locker room afterward and actually interview players. And it wasn't so much like the awe of being around pro players. there was this feeling, and I think all of us can, attest to this, of like being able to cover this story. There's this game going on and you're here in this, arena that you've seen on TV, and it's just, I kind of got butterflies doing it, and that was a lot of fun. I also, Beth, had Ralph Begleiter. I happened to be in his first Road to the White House class back in 2001, and he and I, he worked for CNN. He was able to get me and the editor-in-chief of the Review passes to the 2000 primary debate between Al Gore and Bill Bradley at the Apollo Theater in Harlem. It was like the coolest thing. And, you get to go back there. And I wrote a story. I mostly wrote sports stuff, and I always liked politics, but I thought everybody did. And I learned they don't. And, and I wrote this story about sort of the media circus around it. And Ralph said to me, I know you like sports. Well, he doesn't. But he's like, I know you like sports, but you do this news stuff pretty well. He's like, you ever think about that? And I kind of took it as like an offense. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I spent all this time, trying to do sports. And then, but it really did help sort of shape my journey too. And I realized I didn't talk about it much, but I graduated UD in 2001, worked at the Review. I was a transfer student to the University of Delaware. I started at Baruch College in Manhattan, where I was a finance major, and I hated it. And I decided, like Evan, I was going to combine English and sports. Like, I like to write and I liked sports. So I was an English major with a concentration in journalism. And I, as a staff writer, I managed a couple of the sections of the paper after doing some of this managing sports stuff. I was a layout editor. I freelanced for the News Journal while I was there. My first job was at the Asbury Park Press in New Jersey, and loved it there. But after about a year and only making about $23,000 a year in Metro New York, I decided to go into the lucrative career of teaching. So I became a high school English teacher, which I did for 3 years. But frankly, it was the hardest job I've ever done. Nothing prepared me more for being on air than being a teacher, because every single word you say, you're held accountable for. You have to learn how to be an adult, grow up really quickly. You can't say stuff when you're having a bad day to kids without their parents coming and talking to you. Like that is. And as a dad now, I understand. But after that, I wound up going back to journalism. I went into Columbia Journalism School, applied there, and I saw the industry changing back in 2005, 2006. Decided I want to get some broadcast experience. Let me figure out how to shoot. Let me figure out how to edit video. Let me learn Avid, learn different skills. I wanted to become the least fireable possible. I wanted to have as many skills as you possibly could have, so that you could work across platforms, use my print writing to be able to write online, and also be able to use some of the broadcast stuff. I never thought I would be on air or do any of that. I got an opportunity to do that when I went to NBC News in DC, and I got a job as a researcher in the political unit. I worked there, writing our briefing books, worked on debate coverage, helped prep anchors. I was there for 7 years. It was a great job. I was scared as all anything going on camera for the first time. I look back on some of those, and whew, it was not pretty. And I wound up going into public media. I got a job at PBS NewsHour, where I helped run their political unit. And I'd always loved NPR. I wasn't an NPR listener growing up, more of a broadcast news person, ABC, Peter Jennings growing up. That was my household. But as I got older, I listened to NPR a lot more and really liked it, and went to NPR. I've been there now since 2015, 6 years, and I've really enjoyed it. Done a lot of on-air work. I do a lot of writing online. And it's been a lot of fun. And I really do credit the University of Delaware for building that foundation, especially at the Review, of being able to learn, make mistakes, have professors who were patient. I mean, there were a lot of dumb things and fieriness that I had, and thought that I knew everything, and was not the case. Anybody else want to jump in? Beth, you want to mention anything about your sort of favorite person or favorite event that you've covered? You must have seen a lot of interesting things in your time.
At Delaware specifically, I would say, I wasn't as big at the review. I was really more in the television production aspect of things. And so probably for me, the most pivotal thing was really a culmination of my senior year being actually in Ralph's class, doing a student-run documentary. And it was called Behind Bars, both in jail and alcohol bars. And it was fantastic. We, ran around campus. I had a camera. And I was named the executive producer of the classroom, which was a really good learning lesson for me. Ralph was like, you have to run this whole production as the producer.
So
what does the producer do?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Ellen Cannon wants to know if you can just explain basically what a producer does on a TV show. I think that's a great question because, I hear you with the 2-track thing with like thinking you're going to be on air and then, not knowing what a producer does, frankly. And, producers don't get a ton of credit. Their name isn't on everything, but really the engines that make everything go. So Beth, why don't you tell us, explain what a producer does on a TV show?
Yes, I'd love to. And I didn't know myself. And it really was Nancy and Ralph, both of my professors from UD, that taught me. I hadn't, as you said, really heard much about it. You just see the face on the TV, and that's what I thought I wanted to be because it looked fun. But what I realized is that as a producer, you are responsible for really kind of creating the content in most cases. Now, of course, in the smaller local channels, often people you see on air are creating the stories, writing the stories, and also being on air. But for someone in my current position right now, I am in charge of developing the story. So if we were to find someone to write into Dr. Phil and they say they need help because they have a misbehaving teen, we will pre-interview each of the family members. We will interview them for hours on the phone and type verbatim their stories. Then we figure out kind of the main beats of the story. We figure out the order in which we want to tell the story, what we want to start the show with, what we want to end the show with, and so on and so forth. And write commercial throws and breaks and communicate with the host about what their role is going to be. And really just take the story from beginning to end and shepherd it through the entire process. So it's, like I said, it's interviewing, writing, production management. And then, what I really tell everyone is that it's also like 99% problem solving. As a producer, especially at Dr. Phil, we have a lot of unforeseen challenges that occur on a daily, sometimes minute by minute basis. If we're dealing with an alcoholic and they've had too much to drink the morning of the show, we have to figure out how to get the alcoholic in the car to the stage, dressed, hair, makeup ready, and so forth. Or the
what is the best hangover remedy then?
I don't know. Panic. Yeah. So
adrenaline, right?
I would say the simplest definition as a producer is a problem solver, but it really is a little bit of everything and being able to think very quickly on your toes. But really, it's kind of shepherding a story from beginning to end, behind the scenes, as you said.
All right, well, we're running short on time. We got about 15 minutes left in our panel, but so if there are other questions, please send them in. But I want to ask all of you to sort of weigh in on where we're at in journalism now, the kind of moment we're in, how you feel about the future of it, frankly, and for students who are listening and watching and wondering, what do I do to get to where any of you all are? How would you advise students for what and how to get to where they are? Maybe Matt, you want to start off with that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think I don't know. I think there's a lot of platitudes, and some of them, like sometimes I think I'm not the best person to ask the question because some of the stuff that I did, I wouldn't recommend to other students. Like I was working like I probably spent actually. It's funny. Right before I went on here, the people I worked with at the review told me, hey, please don't tell them how much we exploited your labor. I was like, no, I won't. Well, I just did. But it's like I was just working a ton, and it was like all the review, like all the time. And I wouldn't necessarily advise that other students do it. It worked out for me, but it's still like I would, if I were you, I would try and find, kind of like spread your experiences a little bit more than like just laser focusing in on the review, or that kind of thing. Because I think that might be where, who knows really where journalism's going. But I think that might be kind of, I think it'll be better to have a diversity of experiences than just the one thing all the time. But let's see, what else would I say really? And yeah,
I think that's a really good point, Matt. Diversity of experiences. I, I can speak to the sort of the more print and digital news space, but I think what's been really interesting is to see, I started, at the Review, then I worked at traditional newspapers like the Philadelphia Inquirer as an intern. When I was in graduate school, I worked at a tech news website called Mashable. Then I worked at the Miami Herald, and then finally at CNN. So I sort of had a full range of experiences across, old school media versus new school media. And what I think is actually really interesting at the present now is that you're seeing a lot of, at least in the digital and sort of old school print space, is that some legacy outlets and new outlets are having a lot of success. You've seen the New York Times now has more it now has more digital revenue than it does print revenue and advertising revenue. They've greatly expanded their newsroom. The Washington Post has greatly expanded its newsroom. So I know that there's sort of this historic stereotype of a lot of doom and gloom in the journalism industry, especially in print. But I think what we're seeing is a lot of sort of healthy legacy organizations finding a way forward. Bloomberg has been able to expand significantly, also implemented things like a paywall. And then you've seen sort of new, I think what's in the more local news space, what's interesting to see are places like the Ithaca publication that Matt is at, nonprofit news organizations that are letting go of the news space or the sort of newspaper space, but places like the Texas Tribune in Austin, Texas, I think there's others throughout the country that are using this sort of nonprofit model as a way to get local news and make it a sustainable operation. So I actually think I'm very optimistic about the present right now. I see a lot of really interesting journalism models.
I think you just kind of answered one of the questions that one of the students had, which was, I was going to sort of pose to some of you, which is said, what are the consequences of Americans relying on free or unpaid media? How can you convince Americans that media, particularly news media and local media, is worth supporting? That's a tough one, right? I mean, that's the whole future of local journalism. I think you hit on the fact, I'm in public media. It's a nonprofit model. There are for-profit corporate models, NBC News, CBS News, CBS Sports, all of that are driven by advertising, which, still TV advertising, that's king, right? So that's, and that's what I think has been the hard part with newspapers, is that the digital advertising does not have the same amount of, they just can't get the same amount of money out of digital advertising as they were able to get out of, a print ad from ShopRite over a year, for example. So if anybody have any thoughts on that, about, sort of where we're going with those models, I don't know, Beth or Evan, do you have any thoughts on that? And also kind of, again, the same question about the future of.
I guess I'll hop in. I do not have thoughts on that specifically. I live in the playground of all of this, sports. And look, I would say my advice to anybody that's interested in this field, whether it be sports, news, entertainment, have a wide scope, but have a goal in mind. I mean, I always think I have my 10-year goal. Where would I like to be? What's the ultimate goal here? But I just started saying no to things like a couple months ago, to be honest with you. And that to me is the way you have to approach it. Just be obsessed with the business, be obsessed with learning as much as you can. And don't think that anything is beneath you or is not worthwhile. I mean, I learned so much by just carrying lights to shoots to watch the pros do what they do. And to be around it. And then people go, who's that kid? Oh, that's Evan. Oh, that's Beth. Oh, what's their deal? Like if you're around it enough, then people start to know it's a community. And I don't use the term networking, but you just want to be known as somebody who's constantly engaged in the process of helping get stuff on the air or get stuff on the web, wherever it needs to be. And then where is it going? I would say for me, it's attach yourself to live rights. I mean, and that's where I have found my focus. There was times in recent years where it's, oh, I'd like to do this. I was constantly trying to find the next new thing. And where I've really realized, especially in the last year, just to give some context, I mean, coming up on the anniversary of sitting in my kitchen and getting a call that the NCAA tournament's canceled. And I realized quickly, oh man, I'm not going to be working. And thankfully I had a full-time job, but I'm not going to be on the air until maybe the fall. And that was scary. There's obviously a great appreciation for where we are right now, but the live rights are the thing that is surviving whatever volatility is happening in the market when it comes to sports television, whether it be getting away from studio programming, no more debate TV, more debate TV. The one thing that's still driving things is live rights. So that's why I'm super thankful to be where I am, where everything I do is at a live event. So that's kind of where I stand with it. But say yes, always say yes. Don't learn no until I don't even know when. Again, I felt bad saying no to whatever it was a couple of weeks ago.
That is great advice, honestly, in saying yes and kind of taking everything you possibly can, because you learn so much, you get so much experience from all of those things, and you take a skill away from each of them. And honestly, as somebody who's hired people, one of the things is, I tell interns, if you want to distinguish yourself, roll up your sleeves and show yourself as somebody who can be reliable, get the work done, and not complain, be humble. And that seems like, that's not big, doing the blocking and tackling, so to speak, is not that big a deal. But if you can do that stuff, it really does stand out, especially to bosses who are, our age or older, in that, Gen X to older generation, right? Where we had unpaid internships.
Get used to unpaid.
Yeah. Now most of them are paid, and that's great. But there's a degree of work that has to go into it, because everybody wants these jobs, right? So you got to kind of keep your head down, nose to the grindstone, that whole thing. Beth, I want to maybe pose this one to you, because Kara asked about, in any of your specific fields, what kind of portfolio is needed when first applying? And I pose that to you because you're supervising. I assume that you've hired and maybe fired some people.
Yeah, so I currently have about a team of 15 associate producers that I supervise on a daily basis, and they range in ages from 23 to 58, I want to say. But yes, I'm hiring now. I'm hiring and sometimes letting go people at the end of the season, and sometimes mid-season, pretty often. But I think for me, television internships are important. TV production, of course, I love to see that. But I've also learned that some of my best employees have had a psych degree. And not saying you don't want to take journalism at Delaware, but I really I
assume at Dr. Phil you might need a psych degree.
Yes, well, that, or I've been in the loony bin for 14 seasons. But I think really for me, so much of what you guys are saying is correct about, saying yes. And really it's a lot of energy and attitude. So when you really know the job that you're going into, for instance, like I am a talk show producer. So I am looking for someone who is a very strong communicator and talker. And that while I'll look at their resume, I'm really kind of looking at the person that I want to work with on a daily basis and talk to, and learn what they can add to it, and have creativity, and I do actually give an assignment before people come and interview with me, and I say, listen, if you're going to work on this show, I want to see 3 stories you would book from the news right now. So just kind of looking for that creativity and the right attitude, and really strong communication skills.
Matt, any thoughts on kinds of things that you probably want to have either on your resume, or things that make you, how we expand out our reach in making us more appealing to get other jobs, and especially, students now trying to get into a field that's obviously continuing to morph?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably,
I just want to apologize to the group. We have lost
fact.
we've lost electricity in my neighborhood, which is a very South American issue often. So I apologize. I'm by candlelight right now.
Do you really have a candle?
I'm by candlelight right now because the entire block has lost electricity here in Buenos Aires. But
Oh,
we will
God.
have it back on soon. But this is a
Do you
very
have to go
frequent
cover
problem.
this, or
I hope not. I hope not. But this is a part of being a journalist, is often having to deal with changing circumstances. But I apologize for the lighting and my brief exit. We're dealing with electricity problems here.
see if Patrick had a producer?
Exactly.
Well, hey, to make it fair, all the panelists have to turn out your lights now. Come on, let's go. No, so yeah, what I was saying, I don't think I have any real special insight about, stuff that people haven't already heard before. I do think it's valuable to show people that, or to show, people who are in hiring positions that you can do stuff that's not only writing. I think personally the writing is the most important thing, just, communicating stuff succinctly, accurately. I think that's the most important thing when I was in a position to hire someone, that's what I was looking for. But I think you should also be focusing on, take your own pictures. If something's happening that you think would be valuable to, have live video of, maybe if, like I think back to, we had a bunch of protests around here, around the George Floyd stuff. And, probably the most feedback I've ever gotten on something in my career has been the videos I was taking from those protests that we had of, some stuff that a lot of people would call police brutality, or at least, pepper spray deployments and that sort of thing. And people really appreciated knowing that was going on in real time. So I think, yeah, live video, that's really good. And, everyone's got a podcast, so, what the hell, start a podcast, that's fine. I tried with the review, it was like reprehensible, it was so bad, but I gave it a shot.
Well, so if there's a thread in that, I mean, it does sound like, taking initiative and, trying to stay current, stay on top of the stuff that's changing, learn what's new, change or die, right, is the phrase. And there's a lot of people who kind of stay stuck in the thing that they think is the best way to be. And then, the world passes them by, and there's no faster way that things pass you by than in communications, where, your cell phone is outdated in 6 months. So I don't know, do they even call them cell phones anymore? No, that shows my age. So
I would hop in real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
On that. As an intern, I always thought that somebody should write a book. And if I was maybe Matt or Pat or Beth, more talented writers than I could do it, but I could contribute with respect those that have been there before you too. Like, yeah, you can be young, you can be eager, and you can have command of technology and social media. But when you're in, whether it's I'll speak to, again, a television station, have a lot of admiration and deference for the people that have been there for a while, because you're going to need their help to get a lot of stuff early on, even if it's to like shoot your stand-up so you can put together a fake resume reel, because it's the only way you're going to get one of your early jobs. Those are the folks that are going to shoot it, or they're going to help you edit it, or tell you where you should place this in the reel. And if you're the intern that walks in and thinks you're above it because you were a rock star at UD with the Review or at the campus TV station, I saw it so much that they would immediately just put those kids in the corner and be like, yeah, go log that basketball game. And if you were respectful to those that work there, and you found some way to be valuable, like I said, whether it was carrying stuff or helping do some of the grunt work, our business is super small, and people want to help if they look at somebody like, man, that person, they get it. So it sounds basic, but man, it goes a long way.
Oh, we love Domenico.
It's a walk-off right there. Good night, everybody.
Oh no, did we lose him?
See, Domenico went the full route. He turned off.
Is he doing it from Buenos Aires too?
There he is.
I dropped out. I don't know what happened. My electricity didn't go out, nor did my Wi-Fi, although my kids kind of hated me earlier because I mistakenly unplugged the Wi-Fi There's nothing worse than an 11 and an 8-year-old who suddenly don't have internet.
Or a 36-year-old.
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah, that's universal these days.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there, but anyway, we're back. Evan had some good thoughts there until I froze up and left. So let's just, since it's 8 now, why don't we just do a quick lightning round of just wrap up thoughts. Patrick, maybe start with you, unless you already gave them and I missed them.
No. Sorry. This is by far one of the more embarrassing moments of public speaking that I've had to deal with. But
then you're in good shape, man. If this is your worst moment,
bad.
you're riding high.
Cumulative. It's kind of cool, I think.
This is not. Yeah, this is not theatrics. This the whole neighborhood.
It showed dedication, man. You had an out. See.
Right. No, I wanted to be here for the full event. I would just very quickly like to tell a quick anecdote that I was in college. I got an internship at a newspaper in Connecticut, and they were going to assign me a lot of small sort of day-to-day events. And my journalism professor, Don Fallick at UD, pushed the editors at the newspaper to give me a sort of a big enterprise project that I could really dig my teeth into and develop a portfolio with. And I think if it wasn't without her advocacy, I wouldn't have been put on a big project that summer. But I was, and it ran on the front page of the newspaper. That clip got me an internship at the Philadelphia Inquirer. The Philadelphia Inquirer got me into graduate school. Graduate school got me into CNN. So you can just see that both my education in the classroom and then the advocacy that my professors at UD had during my internships were really pivotal experiences for me to start my journalism career and now be here in Buenos Aires without electricity. But I think what's great, and I think what Evan and Beth and Matt and UDOM have all expressed is this is a great job. I love doing what I do, usually when I have Wi-Fi and lights. But I get to learn every day. Some days I'm in a suit, some days I'm in jeans and a t-shirt because of where I have to go report. But it's a great experience, and you get to learn every day. And there's a promising outlook in the industry. It's always changing. You have to be ready to stomach volatility. But it's fun. It's a wild industry, and I think my biggest problem is I don't know what I would be if I wasn't a journalist. So I'm grateful for the experiences I had at UD, and happy to continue contributing thoughts and speaking on these panel events, because I think UD has a great journalism program, and as all the alumni here can show. But I'll give up the floor and stay off from the candle.
If you get that bug, it really is hard to leave you. I remember when I was a teacher, and Dennis Jackson and I would talk once in a while, and he called me just to check in to see how I was doing. And I was getting, he was like wondering if I was going to write anymore, if I was going to, keep trying to freelance or whatever. And I was like, I don't know, probably not, I'm teaching. And he was like, listen, Dom, a painter paints. Okay. And that was it. Right. It's just like, and I was like, what is he talking about? This riddle. Right. But if it's in you, right, it's hard to give that up. So I think that's what he was talking about. Beth, what are your closing thoughts?
I just want to say that I still use University of Delaware as a resource. Not only did it prep me for my career, but I will literally reach out to Nancy at the end of each, spring semester and say, give me your best students. So for those of you out there that haven't thought to start, combing the senior class of Delaware each season, it's really been fantastic. And she's given me some really fantastic students that I have then gone on to hire as production assistants and then associate producers, and some of them are now producing. So I am just very grateful to not only be a part of this panel, but for professors like Nancy, like Ralph, like so many others that I haven't named, who not only help prepare me, but also are still with me and I still communicate with on Facebook and Instagram, and we stay in touch, and I see their grandkids and their family, and they see my kids, and they still want to help their current students, and I still want to help the current students. So it's a really fantastic resource forever.
All right. Well, Matt, briefly, and then Evan.
I guess parting thoughts. I think I'm on a lot of the same pages as Pat is. Probably a year ago, I was well, maybe a year or two ago, I was like really pessimistic about the future of journalism. But that has done a complete 180. Recently, I think working at this nonprofit news organization, it's really showed me that there will be organizations when corporate places close up or they cut staff. I think you can rely on people still wanting news, and news organizations will pop up in the vacuums that are left over from those places that are now, it's across the street from me is the Ithaca Journal, which was a huge Gannett paper, and now has one employee who doesn't live in Ithaca anymore. So I think there's plenty of hope, more than I would have had a year ago. And if there is anyone who writes for the Review or wants to write for the Review, I know it probably does, because it seemed like when I was there that no one reads it, that no one cares, all that stuff. It's completely not true. When it matters, they will read, they will appreciate it, and it's going to do a lot for you later on in your career as you're trying to enter the field.
I'll just say that this has been incredibly exciting for me to be a part of this panel with fellow alums that I would say have a better command for the industry and all that's gone into it and is currently going on with it. And it's been informative for me. In the world of sports, I would say that be positive about everything, because I think that whether, as I mentioned, whether it's live rights or the programming that's attached to it, the podcast boom that's happening in sports like it is in entertainment and news is a real thing. It's always going to be changing. If you want to do it, do it. Don't let anyone talk you out of it. And if you need any advice or guidance, the beauty of going to a school like University of Delaware is that there's somebody who's ready to hand you an email or a cell phone number. And I would put myself on that list. So if there's anybody out there in this virtual world that we're speaking to that wants to talk further beyond this, that's the big thing. And I know the panelists here and everyone is part of the staff and the faculty. It's about paying it forward. And that's what's been pretty fun in the last few years for me as I've started to become somewhat established, is getting a chance to talk to young folks that are trying to get into it and telling them, chase it down, because the people that are the most committed and that just are undeterred, it's a war of attrition. So just stick it out and it'll all pop.
I think if you want to do it is great advice to everybody, because there's going to be plenty of people when you get into journalism who tell you can't, but you can if you really want to. And I think that's great advice. And you see how wide, the array of experiences are that we've had. You can go any direction you really want to. You just got to hustle. And I think that if you hustle and you try hard and you work and you roll up your sleeves, you're going to make it. And, I wouldn't let anybody tell you can't. There's always going to be need for information, need for unbiased information, and even, well-informed, college basketball picks. So,
Correct.
Don't look at me.
Hey, who's your national champion, Evan?
I think Gonzaga. It's going to take something special to knock them
They're
down.
So good.
That is a well-oiled machine. But this year and being out in Indy last week, there's something about the unique circumstances where everybody is in that city and if you're going to win a national championship, you're going to be in a hotel for over 3 weeks, bubbled up. So as much as it's the play on the court, whoever can remain somewhat on the right track just mentally, because even for me, being bubbled up for whatever it was, 8 days took its toll. So I can't imagine how these 18 to 22-year-olds are doing.
Yeah, we're all going a little nuts, but we'll try to stay sane and keep reporting and doing what we do. So thank you guys for your time and attention. Thanks to our panelists for being here. Thank you to the University of Delaware. And I'll just hand it off to Leslie with the university with some closing thoughts.
Thank you, Domenico, and thank you to all of you on the panel. Nancy, for opening us up tonight and sharing your stories. Beth, Evan, Matt, Patrick, I so appreciative of everything you've spoken to us about tonight. And I really hope that the panelists have enjoyed themselves as much as they've said so. And I also hope that the attendees have done that as well. The Journey to UD experience has been fun to share, and we hope that all of you have enjoyed it. I just want to make sure that you all recognize we have some upcoming events, and we have a UD game night on April 9th. We have, excuse me, we have a UD Cow to Cone, which is a virtual tour of UDairy on April 14th. On April 22nd, we have Earth Day. We're going to have a talk with 2 professors and 2 students. And in late April, we're going to replay the Talk About Race video that came out, our production that came out in February, and have a conversation with the creator of that program and the director of the REP program at University of Delaware. So lots coming up in April. It's all on the alumni website. And I just want to thank all of our speakers and panelists tonight. I want to thank our attendees for asking their questions. And on behalf of the University of Delaware, we hope you all stay healthy and safe, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you.